The girl ran away from the orphanage and found herself in a cemetery, where she fell asleep at her mother's grave. And when she saw who would be her in the morning, she could not believe her eyes. Subscribe and write in the comments where you're watching from. The night was thick with silence, broken only by the distant hum of passing cars and the rustle of leaves in the wind. The air smelled of damp earth, the scent clinging to Riley's skin as she lay curled up against the cold marble of the gravestone. The world felt vast, empty, and indifferent. But here, in this place of the dead, she found something resembling peace. She had run through the iron gates of the orphanage, through darkened streets where the glow of streetlights cast long, flickering shadows. She had run past the places she once knew, the school she had attended before her mother got sick, the bus stop where they used to wait together, the corner store where her mother bought her favorite candy when she had extra money. Each place was now just a reminder of what was gone, and now she was here, at the only place that still felt like home. The gravestone was smooth beneath her fingers, the name etched in stone, Angela Carter. Her mother. The only person in the world who had ever loved her. Riley traced the letters with the tip of her finger, as if by doing so she could bring her mother back just for a moment. The last time she had seen her, she was too weak to speak, her dark brown skin pale, her eyes tired but still filled with warmth. Riley had held her hand, pressing her small fingers into the rough skin, trying to hold on as tightly as she could. But it hadn't been enough. Her mother had died, and Riley had been left to the mercy of a system that didn't care. The orphanage had been a nightmare. From the moment she arrived, she was an outsider. The older kids, the ones who had been there longest, had taken one look at her and decided she was weak. They teased her, called her names, mocked the way she spoke, the way her hair curled too tightly against her scalp. They whispered about her in the dark, stole the little possessions she had left, and the adults weren't much better. The staff looked at her with tired eyes, seeing not a child, but just another burden. They didn't care about the bruises she tried to hide, the loneliness that settled in her chest like a weight. They spoke about her future in cold, detached tones, as if she wasn't even in the room. They said she would be moved soon, sent somewhere farther away, another facility, another place that would swallow her whole. She couldn't let that happen. So she had run. The night had been her ally, hiding her small frame in the darkness as she slipped through the gaps in the fence. She had made it across town, unseen, unnoticed, until she reached the cemetery. She had knelt by her mother's grave, her breath coming in ragged gasps, her heart pounding. And then exhaustion had pulled her under. Now, as she lay curled up in the grass, the chill of the night seeping into her bones, she realized she had nowhere left to go. She couldn't stay here forever. Eventually, someone would find her. Maybe the police. Maybe someone worse. But she was too tired to think about it now. Her eyes fluttered shut, and she let the darkness take her. A voice cut through the haze of sleep. "Child?" Riley's body tensed. Her eyes shot open, and for a moment, she didn't know where she was. The sky was lighter now, the deep black of night giving way to the murky gray of early morning. The air was still cold, but there was a dampness to it now, the kind that signaled the coming of the sun. And standing over her was an old woman. Riley's heart slammed against her ribs. She scrambled backward, her hands digging into the wet grass, her breath coming in short, shallow gasps. The woman took a step back, her face creased with something that looked like concern. She was white, with short gray hair tucked beneath a faded blue headscarf. Her clothes were simple, a long coat buttoned up to her chin, her hands gloved against the morning chill. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Riley's mind raced, trying to figure out what to do. Should she run? Was this woman going to call the police? Would she be dragged back to the orphanage? "I'm not gonna hurt you," the woman said softly. What are you doing here, sweetheart?" Riley didn't answer. She didn't trust her voice. The woman sighed, looking down at the grave Riley had been lying against. When she looked back at her, her face was gentle. "This your mama?" Riley swallowed hard, her throat tight. She wanted to tell the woman to go away. She wanted to disappear, but she couldn't move. The woman didn't push. She just crouched down slowly, careful, like she was trying not to scare a wild animal. "My name's Mary Lou," she said. "I was just visiting my husband. He's over there." She nodded toward a gravestone a few rows away. "Been coming here every week for 10 years now. Never seen you before, though." Riley stayed silent. Mary Lou sighed, rubbing her hands together as if trying to warm them. "It's too cold to be out here all night, child. You must be freezing." Riley pressed her lips together. She didn't know what to say. She didn't want to talk. She just wanted to be left alone. But Mary Lou didn't leave. She didn't ask questions, didn't demand answers. She just stayed there, sitting in the damp grass, looking at the grave like she understood something Riley didn't. And then, after what felt like forever, she said, "Come on, honey. Let's get you something warm to eat." Riley's stomach clenched. She hadn't eaten since yesterday morning. She wanted to say no. She wanted to keep running. But her body was weak, and the cold had settled deep into her bones. She was exhausted. And Mary Lou wasn't looking at her like the others had. She wasn't looking at her like a problem. For the first time in a long time, Riley hesitated. And then, before she could change her mind, she nodded. Riley followed Mary Lou through the cemetery, her steps hesitant, her body stiff from the cold. The morning air clung to her skin, damp and heavy, and her legs ached with every movement. She didn't know if she was making a mistake. She didn't know if she should run, but something in the woman's voice, in the way she had spoken to her without suspicion or anger, had made her pause. And now, step by step, she was walking away from the only place she had left. The streets were quiet in the early morning, the sky still a dull gray as the world slowly began to stir. Mary Lou walked ahead, moving at a steady, deliberate pace, as if giving Riley the chance to turn back at any moment. Riley watched her carefully, her mind racing with questions. Why was this woman helping her? What did she want? Adults never did things without expecting something in return. They walked past rows of small houses with peeling paint and rusted mailboxes. The neighborhood was old, the kind of place where time had settled in and refused to move. The air smelled like wet pavement and distant wood smoke. Riley's shoes, already worn thin, slapped against the cracked sidewalk with every step. She felt exposed here, out in the open, and a new fear crept into her chest. Mary Lou's house was at the end of the street, a small, one-story home with a sagging porch and faded blue shutters. The yard was neat but bare, the grass clipped short but lifeless in the cold season. The house looked old but not abandoned, lived in but not welcoming. Riley hesitated at the steps, her fingers tightening around the sleeves of her jacket. She had been in enough places to know that a home didn't always mean safety. Mary Lou pushed open the front door and stepped inside, leaving it open behind her. She didn't turn to see if Riley followed. The hallway smelled of something warm, something familiar but distant. The scent of coffee, maybe, or old wood. The house was quiet, the air thick with stillness. It wasn't big, just a narrow hallway leading to a small kitchen, the furniture old but clean. Riley stepped inside cautiously, her eyes scanning every detail. She was ready to run if she needed to. "You can sit if you want," Mary Lou said, setting her bag down on the table. "I'll put on some tea." Riley didn't move. She wasn't sure if she should. The kitchen was small, just a wooden table with 2 chairs, a stove that looked older than anything she'd ever seen, and a counter covered in ceramic canisters. Everything in the house felt like it belonged to another time. Mary Lou moved slowly, filling a kettle and setting it on the stove. She didn't ask questions, didn't press for answers. Riley wasn't used to that. Every adult she had met since her mother's death had wanted something from her. Explanations, confessions, obedience. But Mary Lou just went about her business, humming softly under her breath. Riley's stomach twisted with hunger, the smell of something warm teasing her senses. She hadn't eaten since yesterday, but she refused to say anything. Asking for food meant admitting weakness. It meant owing something. Mary Lou opened a cupboard and pulled out a plate, setting it on the table without a word. A few pieces of toast, some butter, a small jar of honey. It wasn't much, but to Riley, it felt like a feast. She hesitated. "I'm not going to ask you where you came from," Mary Lou said, finally looking at her. "You don't have to tell me anything you don't want to, but I figure you're hungry." Riley's hands tightened in her lap. She wanted to say no. She wanted to refuse. But the hunger gnawed at her, sharp and relentless. She sat down slowly, eyeing Mary Lou as she reached for a piece of toast. The first bite was almost painful. The warmth of the bread, the sweetness of the honey. It was too much after so long without real food. She ate slowly, forcing herself not to rush, her body screaming for more. Mary Lou didn't watch her. She just sat across from her, sipping her tea, staring out the window like this was the most ordinary thing in the world. Minutes passed in silence. Riley finished the toast and pushed the plate away, her stomach full but still uneasy. She didn't want to stay. She didn't want to get comfortable, but the warmth of the kitchen, the quiet of the house, made her feel something she hadn't felt in a long time. Safe. Mary Lou set her cup down with a quiet clink. "You got anywhere to go?" Riley didn't answer. She looked down at the table, her fingers tracing the scratches in the wood. Mary Lou sighed, as if she already knew. "I figured as much." Riley's chest tightened. She wanted to tell her not to feel sorry for her. She wanted to tell her she didn't need help, but the words wouldn't come. Mary Lou leaned back in her chair. "You can stay here for a bit," she said, "just till we figure something out." Riley's eyes snapped up. Stay? The word felt foreign. No one had ever offered her a place to stay. Not like this. Not without conditions. Her heart pounded in her chest. This was a trap. It had to be. She pushed back her chair, standing quickly. "I should go." Mary Lou didn't stop her. She just nodded. "All right. Door's open if you change your mind." Riley hesitated. Her body screamed at her to run. She had survived this long by not trusting anyone, by keeping her distance. But where would she go? Back to the cemetery? Back to the streets? She glanced at the door, her hands curling into fists. Mary Lou sipped her tea again, her expression unreadable. She didn't try to convince her. She didn't plead. Riley had never met anyone like her before. Her feet stayed planted where they were. The air in the kitchen felt thick, the silence stretching between them, and then, slowly, she sat back down. The silence stretched between them, heavy and uncertain. Riley sat stiffly in her chair, her hands gripping the edge of the worn wooden seat, her legs tense as if she might bolt at any moment. She wasn't sure why she hadn't run. She wasn't sure why she was still sitting here, in this strange house, with this strange woman who had no reason to care about her. The warmth of the kitchen wrapped around her, pressing against the cold that had settled deep in her bones. The scent of tea and honey lingered in the air, mixing with the faint, musty smell of old books and dust. It was a house that had been lived in for a long time, a place with a history she didn't know. The walls were lined with shelves filled with books that looked like they hadn't been touched in years. A faded quilt was draped over the back of the couch in the next room, the fabric worn thin at the edges. Everything about this place felt like it belonged to someone else. She didn't belong here. Mary Lou finished her tea and set the cup down with a soft clink. "You look like you could use some rest," she said, watching Riley with the same calm patience she had shown since the cemetery. Riley's body ached with exhaustion, but she shook her head. She didn't trust sleep. Sleep meant lowering her guard. Sleep meant waking up to find that everything had changed again. Mary Lou didn't argue. She just nodded as if she understood. Instead of pressing her, she stood and moved to the sink, rinsing out her cup and setting it on the counter. The normalcy of it all was strange. No one had ever treated her like this before. Not the workers at the orphanage, not the people who passed her on the street. There was no pity in Mary Lou's face, no forced kindness that felt like an obligation, just quiet understanding. The minutes passed, stretching into something that felt almost comfortable, and Riley hated that it made her feel safe. She didn't want to feel safe. Safe wasn't real. Safe was a trick, a moment of peace before everything fell apart again. She couldn't stay. She had to go, but her body was so tired. Mary Lou must have seen the hesitation on her face because she wiped her hands on a towel and nodded toward the hallway. "There's a spare room down the hall," she said, "if you want to use it. Bed's made up and everything." Riley tensed. She shouldn't. She should leave. But the thought of stepping back outside, of facing the cold and the hunger and the empty streets made her chest tighten. She hesitated just for a second. Mary Lou didn't push. She just turned away, giving Riley space to make her own choice. And before she could talk herself out of it, Riley stood. The hallway was narrow and dimly lit, the walls covered in framed pictures that she didn't stop to look at. The door to the spare room was open, and inside, a small bed sat against the wall, covered in a faded quilt. A wooden dresser stood in the corner, its surface bare except for an old lamp with a yellowed shade. The air smelled like lavender and dust, like a room that hadn't been used in a long time but had been waiting, just in case. Riley hovered in the doorway, unsure. She had never had a room of her own before. Not really. She had shared a bed with her mother in the tiny apartment they had lived in before everything went wrong, and at the orphanage she'd been crammed into a dormitory with 10 other girls, where privacy was nothing more than a forgotten dream. The bed looked soft, too soft. She wasn't used to soft things. She didn't know what to do with them. Mary Lou didn't linger. She just gestured toward the bed and said, "If you need anything, I'll be in the next room." Then she turned and walked away, leaving Riley alone. The quiet pressed in around her. She sat on the edge of the bed, her hands gripping the quilt. It was old, but clean. The fabric felt strange beneath her fingers, the weight of it unfamiliar. She wasn't sure what to do with herself. Sleep still felt dangerous, but for the first time in a long time, she let herself lie down, just for a moment. just to rest her eyes. She didn't even realize when she drifted off. The sound of voices woke her, low and quiet, murmuring from the kitchen. The air was darker now, the room cast in soft shadows, the edges of the quilt still clutched in her fists. For a moment, she panicked. She had slept too long. She had let her guard down. She sat up quickly, her heart pounding, but the house was still. There were no threats here, no sudden danger waiting for her in the dark, just the sound of Mary Lou's voice, speaking to someone on the phone. Riley crept toward the door, pressing her ear against the wood. "I found her at the cemetery," Mary Lou was saying. "She was freezing." A pause. "I know, Peter, but I couldn't just leave her there." Another pause. "She doesn't want to go back. And from what she's told me, I don't blame her." Riley's stomach twisted. She knew what this was. She knew what was coming next. The police, social services. Someone would come to take her back. She clenched her fists. No, she wouldn't go back. She turned quickly, scanning the room for an escape. The window was too small, too high. The only way out was the door. She had to run. She had to go now. But before she could move, the conversation continued. "No, I haven't called them yet," Mary Lou said. Her voice was steady, calm. "I wanted to talk to her first." Riley froze. A heavy sigh. "Peter, she's just a kid." Silence. Then, "I'll figure something out." A click. The call ended. Riley stepped back from the door, her heart still hammering in her chest. Mary Lou hadn't called social services. She hadn't told them where Riley was. Riley didn't know what that meant. She didn't know what to do with the strange feeling that settled in her stomach. Trust was dangerous. Hope was dangerous. But for the first time in a long time, she wondered if maybe, just maybe, she didn't have to run. Morning came slow and gray, creeping in through the thin curtains of the spare room. Riley lay still beneath the quilt, staring at the ceiling, listening to the unfamiliar quiet of the house. The air smelled like old wood and lavender, a scent that had lingered in her dreams even after she had woken. For a moment, she almost forgot where she was. The warmth of the blanket, the softness of the pillow, it was too much like a home she had never really known. She had slept through the night. That was the first thing that scared her. She hadn't meant to. She hadn't meant to let herself relax, to let her body sink into the mattress as if she belonged there. She should have stayed alert, but something about the house, about Mary Lou's presence, had kept the nightmares at bay. That was the second thing that scared her. She sat up slowly, rubbing the sleep from her eyes. The floor was cold against her bare feet as she crept toward the door, her fingers hesitating on the handle before she pushed it open. The hallway was quiet, the house still. She could hear the faint clatter of dishes in the kitchen, the hum of an old radio playing something soft and low. She thought about last night, about the phone call, about the way Mary Lou had sighed like she was already preparing for a fight. She should leave. She knew that. She should run before things got complicated, but she didn't. Instead, she stepped carefully down the hallway, the wooden floor creaking beneath her weight. She hesitated at the entrance to the kitchen, watching as Mary Lou moved around the room, pouring coffee, slicing bread. The smell of it filled the air, warm and rich, mixing with the faint scent of butter melting in a pan. Mary Lou glanced up and smiled. "Morning, sweetheart. You sleep okay?" Riley shrugged. She didn't know how to answer that. Mary Lou didn't push. She just nodded toward the table. "I made some eggs, if you're hungry." Riley's stomach clenched. She was, but she hesitated. She wasn't used to people giving her things without expecting something in return. Still, she sat. The food was simple, just scrambled eggs and toast, but it was more than she had eaten in days. She ate slowly, watching Mary Lou over the edge of her plate, waiting for the moment when the questions would come. But Mary Lou didn't ask. She just sipped her coffee, her eyes distant, as if she was thinking about something else. Finally, she set her cup down. "I spoke to someone last night," she said. Riley's grip on her fork tightened. Mary Lou sighed. "Don't look at me like that, honey. I didn't call social services." Riley didn't relax. "I called an old friend of mine, Peter. He's a police officer." Riley's chair scraped against the floor as she pushed back. Mary Lou held up a hand. "Now, hold on. I didn't tell him where you were. I just told him I found a girl who needed help. That's all." Riley's heart pounded. "So what happens now?" Mary Lou watched her carefully. "That depends on you." Riley didn't know what that meant. No one had ever given her a choice before. "I know you don't want to go back to that place," Mary Lou continued, "and I know why. But if you stay here, people are going to notice. My neighbors, for one." Riley frowned. "Why would they care?" Mary Lou exhaled, rubbing a hand over her face. "Because this is a small town, sweetheart. People notice things. They talk." Riley looked down at her plate, her appetite gone. She knew what that meant. It wasn't just that she was a stranger. It wasn't just that she had appeared out of nowhere. It was that she was black. She had felt it from the moment she stepped outside. The way people looked at her. The way they hesitated just a second too long before speaking. It wasn't new. She had seen it before, in the way teachers had looked at her at school, in the way shopkeepers had watched her mother as they walked through the aisles. Mary Lou must have seen the look on her face because she sighed again, softer this time. "You're not wrong," she admitted. "Some of them won't like it." Riley's fingers tightened into fists beneath the table. Mary Lou leaned forward, her voice low. "But that don't mean we let them decide what happens to you." Riley blinked. No one had ever said that before. The sound of a car pulling up outside broke the moment. Mary Lou frowned, pushing back her chair as she moved toward the window. Riley tensed, every muscle in her body coiled tight. Mary Lou cursed under her breath. "Damn it!" Riley didn't have to ask. She could see it in the way Mary Lou's shoulders stiffened, in the way her hand tightened around the curtain. It had already started. The knock on the door was sharp and impatient. Mary Lou took a deep breath. "Stay here." Riley didn't move as Mary Lou stepped toward the door, opening it just wide enough to see who was on the other side. "Mornin', Linda," Mary Lou said, her voice steady. Riley couldn't see the woman's face, but she could hear the tightness in her voice. "Mary Lou, I hate to bother you, but I couldn't help but notice you had company." Mary Lou didn't answer right away. Linda hesitated. "It's just, well, people are talking." Riley's stomach twisted. "I see," Mary Lou said. "And what exactly are they saying?" Linda cleared her throat. "You know how folks are. They just think it's strange is all. You taking in a—" She stopped short. Mary Lou's voice was ice. "Taking in a what, Linda?" Silence. "I didn't mean anything by it," Linda said quickly. We all want what's best for you, that's all." Mary Lou exhaled sharply. "Linda, you tell those folks to mind their own damn business." A beat of silence, then footsteps. The sound of a car door slamming shut. Mary Lou closed the door, locking it behind her. She turned back to Riley, her expression unreadable. Told you they'd notice, she muttered. Riley swallowed hard. Mary Lou sighed, running a hand through her hair. Listen, honey, you can stay here as long as you need, but we're going to have to be careful. People like Linda, they don't give up easy. Riley knew that already. She had been fighting her whole life, but for the first time, she wasn't fighting alone. The day dragged on in a thick haze of uncertainty. Riley stayed near the back of the house, away from the windows, away from the front door, away from the outside world that already seemed to be closing in around her. She could hear Mary Lou moving about, the creak of floorboards, the sound of a chair scraping against the kitchen floor. The old woman didn't say much after her conversation with Linda. She didn't have to. Riley knew what it meant. People were watching. Mary Lou didn't send her away. She didn't tell her to pack up and find someplace else to hide. But Riley could feel the weight of the unspoken words hanging between them. It was dangerous for her to be here. Not just because she was a runaway, not just because someone could call the police and have her sent back to that awful place. It was dangerous because of who she was, because of where she was. Mary Lou wasn't like the people in this town. Riley could see that now. Maybe she had been once, long ago, when her skin was younger, when her hands didn't shake when she picked up her coffee cup. But now, she was something different. A woman who had learned to see what others refused to acknowledge. A woman who wasn't afraid to fight. But even fighters had limits. That afternoon, Mary Lou made another phone call. Riley sat on the edge of the bed in the spare room, her legs drawn up to her chest, listening to the low murmur of her voice through the thin walls. I need to know what we can do. A pause. Yes, I know what the law says, Peter, but I also know what's right. Silence. I don't care if they're looking for her. She's not going back there. Another silence, longer this time. Then we'll find another way. Riley stared at her hands, her fingers curling into her palms. She hated that Mary Lou was fighting for her, not because she didn't want to be fought for, but because she knew how these things worked. The world didn't let people like her win. Not for long. When Mary Lou finally hung up, she stood in the doorway, her expression unreadable. We need to figure something out, she said simply. Riley nodded. She didn't say it, but they both knew. Time was running out. Mary Lou pulled out an old book of phone numbers, flipping through the pages like she was searching for something long forgotten. Riley watched from the doorway, silent, wary. There's a woman I know, Mary Lou said after a while. Used to be a lawyer. She does some work with... She hesitated, choosing her words carefully. Kids in situations like yours. Riley swallowed hard. She might be able to help. Help. That word again. She had heard it before, whispered by social workers with tired eyes, by teachers who barely knew her name. They always said they wanted to help, but they never did. Still, she didn't argue. Mary Lou made the call. Riley listened as she spoke, her voice steady but urgent. The woman on the other end asked questions. How old was she? Where had she come from? Did anyone know where she was? I don't think they've put out anything official yet, Mary Lou said, but it's only a matter of time. Riley's stomach twisted. When the call ended, Mary Lou looked at her with tired eyes. She wants to meet you. Riley's pulse quickened. What for? To see what can be done. Riley exhaled sharply. She didn't like this. She didn't like the idea of being seen, of stepping into the light when she had spent so long trying to disappear. But what other choice did she have? The next morning, they drove to the city. Riley had never been in a car with Mary Lou before. She wasn't sure what she expected, but it wasn't this. The old woman drove with a slow, steady hand, her gaze fixed on the road ahead. She didn't fill the silence with small talk. She didn't ask Riley if she was scared. She already knew. The city was different from the small town they had left behind. It was louder, busier, filled with people who didn't stop to stare. Riley felt herself shrinking into the seat, pressing as close to the door as she could, her fingers tight around the fabric of her jeans. Mary Lou parked in front of a small office building, the kind that looked like it had been there forever. The woman they were meeting, her name was Teresa Holloway, was waiting inside. She was black. That was the first thing Riley noticed. She was tall, with short-cropped hair and glasses that rested low on her nose. She looked at Riley the way no one else had in a long time, not with pity, not with suspicion, but with understanding. Mary Lou made the introductions. Riley didn't say much. Teresa sat across from her, folding her hands on the desk. "I want to help you," she said. Riley looked away. "I know you don't trust me," Teresa continued. "That's okay. You don't have to, but I need to know what happened to you." Riley's throat tightened. Mary Lou spoke for her at first, filling in the details. The orphanage, the way she had been treated, the reason she had run. Teresa listened. She didn't interrupt. Then she turned to Riley. "Do you want to go back there?" The words sent a shiver through her. "No," Riley whispered. Teresa nodded like she already knew. "Then we need to make sure that doesn't happen." The next few days were a blur of meetings and paperwork. Teresa made phone calls, pulled strings, dug into records. She found complaints against the orphanage, filed by other children who had escaped. She spoke to people who had worked there, people who knew what really happened behind those locked doors. She was building something, a case, a fight, but fights like these weren't easy, and the town wasn't done with Mary Lou yet. The first sign of trouble came in the form of a letter slipped under the door in the dead of night. Riley found it first. No return address, no name, just a single piece of paper with 6 words scrawled across it. "Mind your own business, Mary Lou." She brought it to her in the morning. Mary Lou read it once, then crumpled it in her fist. "I figured they'd try something," she muttered, "but it wasn't just letters. It was the way people looked at her in the grocery store, the way the waitress at the diner ignored her when she asked for coffee, the way a car slowed outside the house late one night, its engine idling for a little too long before finally driving away. Mary Lou didn't scare easy, but Riley could see it, the way she moved a little slower, the way she double-checked the locks before bed. This wasn't just about Riley anymore. This was a war. One they had no choice but to win. The pressure tightened around them like an invisible grip, one that neither Mary Lou nor Riley could ignore. The letter had been just the beginning. In the days that followed, Mary Lou received phone calls where no one spoke, only the distant sound of someone breathing on the other end before hanging up. A woman at the post office, one Mary Lou had known for years, refused to meet her eyes when she handed over her mail. The stares in town grew colder, more lingering, as if waiting for her to cave in, to send Riley away, to do what was expected of her. But Mary Lou didn't cave. She made her stance clear with every step she took down Main Street, with every deliberate glance she gave to those who dared to judge her. And she never once mentioned the threats to Riley. Not directly. But Riley saw the tension in her jaw, the way she checked the windows before locking up at night, the way she held her shoulders straighter when they went into town. Riley had lived most of her life feeling unwanted, disposable. But Mary Lou refused to treat her that way. Still, the law didn't care about defiance. The law cared about paperwork, rules, and signatures. It cared about what was written, not what was right. Teresa called late one evening, her voice steady but firm as she laid out the situation in plain terms. There was no official missing persons report filed for Riley yet, likely because the orphanage hadn't wanted to draw attention to the fact that another child had run away. But that wouldn't last. Eventually, someone would realize that Riley hadn't just disappeared into the streets. Someone would ask questions, and when they did, social services would come looking for her. Mary Lou listened in silence, nodding occasionally, as if Teresa could see her through the phone. Riley sat at the table across from her, her hands curled around a cup of tea she hadn't touched. She tried not to listen, but the words settled over her like a heavy blanket, unavoidable and suffocating. "There's only one way to make this official," Teresa said. Mary Lou already knew what that was. She had to file for guardianship. It wasn't as simple as just signing a few papers. It meant proving that she was fit to care for Riley, that she had the means and stability to raise a child who wasn't biologically hers. It meant proving to a system built against kids like Riley that she was worth fighting for. They met Teresa at her office the next day. The woman wasted no time, setting out the legal forms in a neat stack on her desk, walking Mary Lou through every requirement, every potential roadblock. Riley sat quietly beside her, feeling like a spectator in a battle that was supposedly about her, but happening entirely outside her control. "You have a few things in your favor," Teresa said, tapping a pen against the table. "You have a steady income, no criminal record, the house is paid off, that's all good." Mary Lou raised an eyebrow. "And what's the bad?" Teresa sighed. "Your age." Mary Lou snorted. "I'm not dead yet." "No, but the state will see this as a risk. You're retired, you don't have a spouse, you've never fostered before, and—" She hesitated, glancing at Riley. "There's going to be pushback, because of who Riley is, because of where we are." Riley's stomach clenched. Mary Lou just exhaled sharply, as if she had expected nothing less. "What can we do?" she asked. "I need character witnesses," Teresa said. "People who can vouch for you, say you're capable of taking care of a child. People with influence." Mary Lou scoffed. "You mean people the state will listen to because they're the right kind of people?" Teresa didn't argue. Riley felt the weight of it pressing down on her. Even here, even with Teresa fighting for her, the rules were built against them. Mary Lou leaned forward. "Tell me what we have to do." The next few weeks passed in a blur of legal meetings, paperwork, and tense conversations behind closed doors. Teresa guided them through every step, filing petitions, collecting letters from the few people in town who were willing to support Mary Lou's case. The local pastor, an old friend of Mary Lou's late husband, agreed to write a statement. A retired teacher vouched for her character. Even Peter, the police officer, provided a letter saying he had known Mary Lou for years and that she was more than capable of giving Riley a home. But it wasn't enough. Not for the court, not for the people who saw Riley as a problem, not a person. The hearing was set for a Monday morning, inside a courthouse that smelled of old paper and disinfectant. Riley sat beside Mary Lou, her hands curled into her lap, her heartbeat steady but fast. She had spent most of her life being ignored by adults when they made decisions about her. Now she was being watched too closely. The judge was an older white man with tired eyes and a deep crease between his brows. He listened as Teresa laid out their case, nodding occasionally, but not giving away his thoughts. The representative from Child Services, a woman with a clipboard and a detached expression, went next, stating that while Mary Lou seemed like a good person, the reality was that Riley would be better suited in a more traditional foster environment. Riley's fingers curled tighter. She wanted to scream. Mary Lou, to her credit, didn't flinch. She sat with her back straight, her hands folded neatly in her lap, waiting her turn. When the judge finally turned to her, she spoke plainly. "I don't have a lot of fancy words," she admitted. "I don't have a college degree, and I don't have a perfect house with a white picket fence. But I know what it means to love a child. And I know that girl deserves better than to be treated like she's just another case file." The judge watched her carefully. "I may not be her mother," Mary Lou continued, "but I'm willing to be the next best thing, if she'll have me." Riley's breath caught. She had never heard anyone say something like that about her before. The courtroom was silent for a long moment. The judge sighed, looking over the papers in front of him, then exchanged a glance with the child services worker. "We'll need time to review the case," he said. "A decision will be made soon." The gavel struck the wood. The hearing was over. Riley didn't know what to feel. Outside on the courthouse steps, Mary Lou turned to Teresa. "What do you think?" Teresa exhaled. "I don't know." Riley looked down, biting the inside of her cheek. Mary Lou put a hand on her shoulder. "No matter what they decide," she said, "I'm not giving up on you." Riley wanted to believe her. She really did. But she had spent her whole life being let down. She wasn't sure she could survive it again. The days after the hearing passed in a slow, unbearable limbo. Riley felt trapped between two realities, one where she would finally have a home, and one where everything would be taken from her yet again. The courthouse had been just another reminder that her life was not her own, that strangers had the power to decide where she belonged. Mary Lou didn't let her dwell on it too much. She carried on as if nothing had changed, as if there wasn't a decision hanging over them like a storm cloud. She still made breakfast in the mornings, still fussed over Riley's tangled hair, still scolded her for leaving her shoes in the wrong place. It was strange, the normalcy of it all. Riley had never had normal before. She wasn't sure what to do with it, but the town hadn't forgotten. The glances in the grocery store turned into outright stares. Conversations went silent when Mary Lou walked by. Riley felt it every time she left the house. The weight of people's expectations, their disapproval, their judgment. It clung to her skin like a second layer of clothing, something she couldn't shake no matter how hard she tried. The worst of it came one afternoon when she was walking home from the library. Mary Lou had let her go on her own, trusting her to take the short path through town and come straight back. It was a small thing, but to Riley it felt like freedom. She kept her head down as she walked, trying not to pay attention to the people around her. But she didn't miss the whispers. "She shouldn't be here. That woman's lost her mind. She'll regret it." The words slid under her skin, sharp and cold. She gritted her teeth, forcing herself to walk faster. Then, a voice louder than the rest. "Hey, girl." Riley froze. She turned slowly, heart pounding. 3 boys stood near the entrance of the hardware store, all of them older than her. She recognized them. They went to the local high school, the same one she would have gone to if things had been different. The tallest one, a boy with light brown hair and a smirk that made Riley's stomach turn, took a step forward. "You lost or something?" Riley's hands curled into fists. She knew how this worked. She had seen it before, had been on the receiving end of it too many times to count. It didn't matter that she hadn't done anything wrong. It didn't matter that she just wanted to go home. They wanted a reaction. She forced herself to turn away, to keep walking, but they didn't let her. "Hey, I'm talking to you." The boy moved faster than she expected, stepping in front of her before she could get away. She stopped short, her pulse hammering in her ears. "What do you want?" she asked, keeping her voice steady. The boy smiled, but there was nothing friendly about it. "Just wondering what makes you so special. You think you can just come into our town and take whatever you want?" Riley stiffened. "I didn't take anything." "Didn't you?" His smirk widened. "Mary Lou's a good woman. She doesn't deserve to be stuck with someone like you." The words hit harder than she wanted them to. She swallowed past the lump in her throat. "Move." The boy didn't. For a moment, Riley considered running. She could shove past him, make a break for it. But she knew they would follow. They would chase her, and even if she got away, they would still be here tomorrow. And the day after that. They weren't going to stop, so she did the only thing she could think of. She laughed. It wasn't a real laugh. It was hollow, bitter, but it was enough to make the boy hesitate. "What's so funny?" he asked, narrowing his eyes. "You." Riley tilted her head, forcing herself to meet his gaze. "You think you're scary? Please. I've dealt with worse than you." The boy's expression flickered. She didn't give him a chance to recover. "I don't care what you think," she said, stepping around him. "I'm not going anywhere." And then she walked away. She didn't look back. She half expected them to follow, to shove her, to do something worse. But they didn't. Maybe they had expected her to cry. Maybe they had expected her to cower. But Riley Carter didn't cower. When she got home, she didn't tell Mary Lou what had happened. She didn't need to. Mary Lou took one look at her face and knew. The older woman sighed, rubbing a hand over her eyes. "People like that, they don't change easy," she said. Riley exhaled. "I know." Mary Lou studied her for a long moment, then nodded. "Come on," she said, motioning toward the kitchen. "I made peach cobbler." Riley hesitated. Then, slowly, she followed. 2 days later, the judge made his decision. They were called back to the courthouse, back to the same cold room where everything had started. The judge sat at his bench, looking down at them with the same unreadable expression he had worn before. Riley braced herself for the worst. Mary Lou squeezed her hand. The judge cleared his throat. "I have reviewed the case," he said, "and while I recognize the concerns brought forth by Child Services, I also recognize the testimony provided on behalf of Miss Williams." Riley held her breath. "The court finds no reason to remove Riley Carter from the home in which she currently resides. Guardianship is granted." For a moment, Riley didn't move. She didn't breathe. Then Mary Lou's fingers tightened around hers. And just like that, she wasn't alone anymore. The house felt different after the judge's decision. Not because anything had physically changed. Mary Lou still brewed her morning coffee the same way. The floors still creaked in the same places. The air still carried the scent of lavender and old books, but because something inside Riley had shifted. The weight she had carried for so long, the constant uncertainty, the knowledge that she was always one wrong step away from losing everything, had lessened. It wasn't gone. Not entirely. Maybe it never would be. But for the first time in a long time, she had something that felt permanent. That didn't mean everything was easy. The town didn't forget overnight. The people who had whispered behind Mary Lou's back, the ones who had sent their thinly veiled warnings, still looked at Riley with the same wariness. The 3 boys who had confronted her outside the hardware store didn't bother her again, but they didn't have to. The message had already been sent. She wasn't welcome here. But Mary Lou made it clear that she wasn't going anywhere, and so Riley stayed. She settled into a life that still felt foreign, but less so with each passing day. Mornings became a routine. Breakfast at the old wooden table, sometimes with Mary Lou humming a song Riley didn't recognize. Afternoons were spent at the library or on the back porch with a book, the silence of the small town pressing in around her, but not suffocating her the way it once had. Evenings brought quiet conversations, stories from Mary Lou about her late husband, about the town before it had become what it was now. Riley never said it, but she liked those stories. They made the house feel fuller, like it wasn't just the 2 of them trying to hold the world at bay. She started school a few weeks after the hearing. That was the hardest part. If the stairs in town had been bad, the ones at school were worse. She was the only black student in most of her classes. The teachers tried to act like they didn't notice, but Riley could see it in the way they hesitated before calling on her, in the way their eyes flickered to the other students, waiting for some kind of reaction. Some kids ignored her. Others whispered, not always quietly. The first time someone used the word she had heard too many times before, she clenched her fist so hard her nails dug into her palms. She had learned a long time ago that fighting back didn't help. It just gave people an excuse to say she was the problem. Mary Lou knew something had happened the second Riley walked through the front door that afternoon. She didn't ask right away. She just made dinner like she always did, humming under her breath, setting the table with practiced ease. Riley sat stiffly in her chair, her appetite gone, her mind still replaying the words she had heard in the hallways. Mary Lou finally sat down, folded her hands in her lap, and looked at Riley with quiet patience. "You want to talk about it?" Riley stared at her plate. "Not really." Mary Lou nodded, as if she had expected that. "All right." They ate in silence for a while. Then Mary Lou said, "You know, I grew up in a town a lot like this." Riley glanced up. Mary Lou took a slow sip of her tea. "It wasn't easy being different. Even when you weren't all that different, folks found ways to remind you you didn't quite belong." She exhaled, setting her cup down. "But you don't let them decide who you are." Riley wanted to believe that. She wasn't sure she did, but she nodded anyway. The school didn't get easier, but she stopped letting it bother her as much. She focused on the few things that did make sense. Her books, her art, the quiet refuge of the library where no one looked at her like she didn't belong. Months passed, seasons changed, and then, one day, it was 8 years later. Riley stood in the bedroom that had once felt temporary, packing the last of her things into a suitcase that had seen better days. The walls around her were the same, but she wasn't. She had graduated high school with top marks. She had spent the last few summers working, saving every penny she could, and now she was leaving for college. The idea still felt strange, unreal. A part of her had never believed she would make it this far, but Mary Lou had. She stood in the doorway now, watching Riley with a quiet kind of pride. "You got everything?" Riley nodded, zipping up the suitcase. "I think so." Mary Lou stepped forward, reaching out to smooth a wrinkle in Riley's shirt the way she always did. "You nervous?" Riley hesitated, then nodded. Mary Lou smiled. Good. Means you care. They stood in silence for a moment. Then Mary Lou exhaled. I ever tell you how proud I am of you? Riley swallowed past a lump in her throat. Yeah, she murmured. You have? Mary Lou nodded. Good. Just making sure. The drive to the city was long, but not uncomfortable. Riley watched the scenery blur past, feeling the weight of everything behind her, the life she had built in a place that had never really wanted her. But Mary Lou had wanted her, and that was enough. They pulled up in front of the dormitory, and for the first time in a long time, Riley felt something that might have been hope. She turned to Mary Lou, exhaling slowly. You gonna be okay? She asked. Mary Lou snorted. Please? I survived raising you, didn't I? Riley rolled her eyes. She stepped out of the car, grabbing her suitcase, hesitating for just a second before turning back. Mary Lou smiled. Go on now. Riley nodded, and then she walked toward the future waiting for her. But she never forgot where she came from. She never forgot the woman who had fought for her when no one else would. And every year, no matter how far she had gone, she always came home. Subscribe to the channel so you don't miss what's next. Watch more videos and share this one with others.